Hey guys, I'm doing a little video today comparing the 4 different configurations for the B6.1 and .2 series of Team Associated two-wheel drive buggies. There are 4 different configurations available. One, unfortunately, has been discontinued. More on that later if I remember. There's the Laydown gearbox. So if you were to buy a B6.2, it comes with a laydown gearbox. This kit is intended for the highest traction level tracks, like carpet, for example. It actually is pictured here with carpet wheels and tires on it. And then there's the Layback, which comes with this car, the B6.2D. That is the main difference. Well, there's 2 differences. The B6.2 comes with a +3mm chassis. Apparently the longer chassis is better for high grip tracks. And then there's the B6.2D, which comes with the same chassis that the B6.1 came with. And it also comes with the other gearbox configuration we're going to talk about today, which is the Layback Gearbox. Primary difference between a laydown gearbox and a layback and laydown is the size of the idler gear. So here we have 2 idler gears. The smaller idler gear is the one that would be found in the Layback gearbox, and it's located right here in the gearbox. So the way to tell a layback from a laydown at a glance without flipping the car over and seeing where the chassis brace is attached is if you look at the side here, the layback case is physically smaller. It's shorter, and that's because it doesn't have to accommodate this large idler gear. Now, this large idler gear in a lay-down gearbox, what it does is it physically makes the gearbox case larger and pushes your motor and top shaft and spur gear all forward in the car. And that again is to get the weight away from the rear wheels, because this gearbox configuration, the lay-down, is being used on high grip track where you don't need all the weight behind the wheels like in a rear motor car. You want corner speed, and corner speed is achieved, greater corner speed is achieved with a lay down configuration where the motor is pushed further forward. So that's the difference between the layback and the lay down. The primary difference is the size of the idler gear. The lay down uses a large idler gear so that the motor is pushed even further forward than it is with the layback. Okay, everything else is the same. They use the same diff, they use the same ball stud mount, same chassis brace, the waterfall here. They're the same length, but when you install a lay down in a B6.1 or .2 chassis, there's an extra set of holes for the chassis brace further forward. The holes furthest forward are for the lay down configuration. All right. Other than that, everything's the same. Same top shaft, same slipper clutch. It's a pull through slipper clutch, where the nut, rather than being on the clutch shoe next to the spur gear, is actually on the opposite side of the gearbox. And as you tighten the spring, you're pulling the forces inward, not crushing it against the clutch. You're pulling it towards the motor side of the car. That's it. Okay. The layback is used on clay tracks and dirt tracks with that are high grip. Okay. That's when you would use this. If you've got a dirt track that's high grip, you'll use the layback configuration. If you're on a track where the track conditions are not as favorable as they would be where you would use a layback, you can use a 3-gear stand-up. Okay, so this is for looser dirt off-road tracks again, and what this gearbox does is it stands the idler gear up. So here in the layback, all of the gears are almost horizontal, okay? And that's so we can push the motor further forward. So the gears are laid back in a line. Here in the 3-gear stand-up, the idler gear has been moved up, which also brings the top shaft up. Now, the top shaft in the 3-gear stand-up is different from the layback gearbox, but after that, everything is the same. The idler gear is the same, the diff is the same, the ball stud mount is the same. The only internal difference is the top shaft is different for the 3-gear stand-up as it is for the layback. The chassis brace or waterfall is also different, and it's shorter. So if we compare the two, you can see how much longer the layback waterfall is compared to the 3-gear stand-up. And so that's because the motor is being pushed further back on the car. So we don't, and this, if we went with a long chassis brace or waterfall, we couldn't get the battery to follow the motor back towards the rear. So Associated provides a shorter waterfall for the 3-gear stand-up. The same waterfall is used on the 4-gear stand-up, and it would bolt into the same location on the chassis. The other thing about the 3-gear stand-up, 2 other things to note, is it has a complete gear cover that covers both the pinion and the spur, so similar to what you would see in an older car, or especially a rear motor car back in the day. Gear covers were pretty standard. The clutch is still the pull-through kind as the layback and the laydown. If we pop the cover off, the gear cover off, you'll see that the spur gear, the clutch, it's all the same. Same clutch housing, same slipper pads. You got a couple of different spur gear options. This one is not suitable for the HTC clutch, which is something that I have. Do I have it on this one? I'm not sure. I'm running an HTC on my stadium truck for sure. The HTC uses 3 clutch pads instead of 2. There's an extra clutch shoe in there, and that's supposed to be used for low grip tracks. I've yet to test one, but I'm going to test one this spring for sure. The other difference is the shock tower goes on the back of the gearbox and only on the back. A layback and laydown gearbox, you can put the shock tower on the front or the back of the gearbox, and that's in case you want to run your shocks behind the arm or in front of the arm. So if you are using a layback and conditions are a little loose, you can move the shock tower and shocks to the back of the arm to change the weight bias a little bit and increase your forward traction. If you're using a stand-up configuration, it's assumed that things have gotten pretty bad, and the only option is to have your shock tower on the back. There is a spacer here that bolts directly onto the gearbox, and then your shock tower is bolted to that, and your shocks will be run on the back of the arm. All right. And then finally, and unfortunately, this gearbox configuration, which I've talked about in other videos, has been discontinued by Associated. And I would imagine the reason for discontinuing it is it's not a popular seller for them, because most people running these kinds of cars are running them on groomed tracks that are well maintained and they're built to be high grip and the surfaces have been treated and whatnot. But if you're on an old school track where the surface isn't treated, this is your best option and still maintaining a mid-motor configuration. So main difference between this gearbox, now I realize my camera is flipping the image here, but if we are standing behind the car, all right, the motor for the 3-gear stand-up is on my left side, or the left side of the car. The 4-gear stand-up has it on the right side. And the reason for that is it uses the rotation of the motor to, again, add traction. So that's why they flip the motor to the other side. So it can actually use the motor's rotation to generate forward traction. The other difference is it uses an original B6 ball stud mount and B6 gearbox brace when it bolts onto the chassis. So I've not tried to put this onto a B6. I've only ever put them onto B6.2s, which use the same chassis as the B6.1, but it may, you know what? I've got a B6 chassis here. Hold on. I started this video over 3-4 times. And one of the reasons why I kept starting it over was because I would say that the stand-up, the 4-gear stand-up, would fit on an original B6, and I didn't know if it did or not. I wasn't 100% confident, so I didn't want to say it and then be wrong and have the internet yell at me and scold me, as it's so famous for doing. And then it finally it dawned on me that I had a B6 chassis here. So I pulled out an original B6 chassis, not a 0.1, not a 0.2, just an old school B6 chassis. You can always tell a B6 chassis from a B6.1 or 2 chassis by how the C block attaches. See how far out these screw holes are here? It's different than the B6.1 or 2. Anyway, long rambling story short, the 4-gear configuration, 4-gear stand-up configuration will fit the original B6, the B6.1, and the B6.2. So there you have it. But as I said, unfortunately, this has been discontinued. I don't like it, but I understand it. So, well, I hope that was somewhat educational for you to see the differences between the laydown, the laydown, the layback, the 3-gear stand-up, and the 4-gear stand-up. Keep in mind, laydown, layback, and 3-gear stand-up, these ones are for the 0.1 and 0.2. They don't fit the original B6, that's for sure. The original B6 has its own version of the 3-gear stand-up. It has its own version of a laydown, and the 4-gear stand-up does fit. So that's really cool. Yeah, there you have it. There's Team Associated's 4 gearbox configurations, and I hope that was educational for you. Thanks for watching, guys.